Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Retro Recap. I'm doing one of these pretty much every time I upload a new video, just discussing the aftermath and all the thoughts around it that I didn't fit into the actual video itself. This time I'm going to be talking about the Karl Jobst versus Billy Mitchell. Now this one, again, it's crazy because it's been ongoing for so long. These lawsuits take so long and I've been following it for years, and I want to start off with maybe a bit of an anecdote. Because I have known, when it comes to Apollo Legend, who, as we know, is deeply tied into this whole thing, I've known him since way back in the day. I met him probably about 2013, 2014, and back then he was called Frogbert. I don't think many people necessarily know that, but that was his name, and he was speedrunning Ocarina of Time. I was also playing Ocarina of Time back then, and we raced each other a lot. I've even got some old unlisted videos on my channel from back then of us in races back then. So I knew him from the beginning, and as soon as he changed his name to Apollo Legend and started making his videos and everything. And he always gave me some encouragement on my videos as well, and he encouraged a lot of other people to try to get into speedrun YouTube. So he really is a big part of why this whole scene came about in terms of speedrun YouTube, Karl Jobst, all these people. Now, because of that and because of my history with Apollo, and I was quite invested in his whole story and what was happening with him, when the unfortunate event happened of when he took his own life, which was back in 2020, I wanted to know, as somebody who felt I had some form of connection to him, felt I was not a super close friend of him, but definitely a friend of him, I wanted to know the real truth of why it happened. I didn't want to get taken away, whisked away by any rumors and speculation. I wanted to clearly distinguish between what was truth, what was speculation. And back then, when this whole rumor, the speculation came about, that it was something to do with Billy, he had to pay a lot of money to Billy, and something about this had caused him to take his own life in that way. I immediately could tell this is speculation. There was no clear source of it. It's something that you can understand why people would come up with it, but there was no real reason. I mean, you could say there's some basis to it. You could say, well, if he had to do a settlement with Billy, then you could assume that maybe he would have made some form of payment. But it should be clear that that was speculation. And now I'll say this. The moment that Karl uploaded that video with the clip in question, the moment, and this was a few months, I would say this is about 3 months after the Apollo Legend death, Karl uploaded this video where he repeated this claim. And he repeated it as if it was fact. He didn't say, this is a rumor. He didn't say this is speculation. He stated it as if it was fact, as if he was 100% sure. And he went into it, he spoke as if, Apollo was destitute or something like this. The way he was talking as if, Billy had made Apollo destitute, like he was on the streets, he had to take on multiple jobs just to survive or something like this. So that, as far as we know, was not true. I don't know where he came up with all that and why he stated it as if it was a fact. So I'll be honest, from the very day, because I saw that video that Karl uploaded on that very day when he uploaded it, I saw it. And immediately when I heard him make that statement, way back then, I remember the exact day, the red flags were going off for me. And I also immediately noticed that this could be a problem for him. This could come back to bite him. I knew that, how could he possibly know? What was his source? What could his source possibly be? And I knew it was going to be a problem. And I was annoyed at the time that he was spreading this rumor, continuing to fan the flames of this rumor, which he should have known better to avoid. Now, on the other hand, you can also say, look, maybe he just got swept up in the rumor mill. And in fairness to Karl, he was not the originator of this rumor, I would say. A lot of people were coming up with this rumor the moment, on the very day that Apollo died. So you can't necessarily put the blame on him for starting the rumor, but he definitely was the biggest person who then spread it further. When he definitely should have known by that point, because again, this was a few months after there was time for the air to clear, he definitely should have known that what he was saying was at least speculation. He shouldn't have stated it as if it was a fact. I was personally quite annoyed by that. And what should he have done? Well, what he should have done is the moment that he got the information in, that what he was saying was false, he should have simply removed it, retracted it, apologized for it, and he should have made it clear that that was all incorrect. But one thing that the judge pointed out is that that's not actually what he did. He actually continued to maintain, even up until recently, he continued to maintain this fact of how he believed that the settlement had contributed to the Apollo legend death. And I believe that it was part of his ego of why he did. He didn't want to give any ground. He didn't want to give a single inch to Billy. He had such a big ego when it came to the whole thing with Billy. I mean, you only need to look at how he spoke in his videos. You could tell that he was never going to give an inch to Billy no matter what. Even if he said something outright wrong, he would never, give anything to Billy. And that's why he was so adamant. He didn't want to admit he was wrong about it. Because out of all the people that, Karl Jobst has got into disputes with many people, but out of all the people, Billy is clearly the one that he's the most invested in every sense. Personally, I would say personally in his head as well. He views himself as being highly invested in that whole thing. And that's why he couldn't bring himself to admit his fault there. Now, there is a few other things about this I want to bring up. One thing is the fact that, and I should have stated this in the video, I kind of forgot to state this. This is a take-home message. If there's any YouTubers watching this, this is a message to any YouTuber who may be watching this. It's also a bit of a message to me, because I'm obviously a bit of a YouTuber, and obviously to Karl himself as well. A takeaway message from this is YouTubers need to start getting more serious. They need to start getting more serious about journalistic standards, effectively. There are probably many YouTubers who could get destroyed and could have similar things happen to them. Most of the time, when they make claims like this that are false and whatnot, most of the time the person that they're making the claim about, he doesn't have the money, he doesn't have the resources, he doesn't have the energy, the patience to sue, to file a lawsuit. But if they did, there's probably many other YouTubers who could get wrecked for something like this. So most YouTubers, many times they may make a claim like this. Most of the time they'll never, face a legal battle over it, just because most people are not in the position that Billy is, where he's able and willing to sue. But I saw somebody come into the Karl Jobst Discord earlier, and I'll say this, and by the way, before I give this next point, if anyone wants to join the Discord, there is a waiting room channel. So if anyone wants to call in and discuss this, give your opinion, and maybe somebody disagrees with me on this, then I'd be happy to debate it a bit. But that's up to you. Or if anyone wants to raise any questions, then you can join the waiting room. And as soon as I'm done my little monologue here, I'll bring you in. If not, if nobody's going to join, then I'll just go for myself until I've said everything I want to say. But here's another thing I'll say. So recently, as earlier today, somebody joined Karl's Discord and he gave him some advice. He said, Karl, listen, I'm a fan of your work, but whenever you make a statement about someone, you need to be careful. You can't just be calling people scammers, con men. You can't just be, criminals. You can't be throwing around these labels willy-nilly. But, you can't just be throwing around these labels at people. And you have to think, if you are going to make a statement like that about someone, is the statement that I'm making, is it going to piss this guy off? If it is, does he have the resources, the capability to sue me? And if he does, am I prepared? Do I feel confident to defend this claim in court? That is the checklist. That is the 3-stage checklist that you basically need to go through before you make any claim about anyone on YouTube or wherever else, certainly on a public platform. You need to check, all those 3 stages. Ultimately, does he have the capability to sue me? And if he does, then, do I feel prepared to defend this in court? If he had gone through that checklist, Karl would have acted differently here. And it's also true of what the judge said, that ultimately Karl viewed himself as a crusader against Billy, and that again stopped him from, he had a sense of pride that he wasn't going to back down, he wasn't going to settle with Billy, he wasn't going to admit any error to Billy, and because of that sense of pride, it also made him act more cocky than he should have done, which also pissed off the judge. You can tell from the judge's closing statements in the trial. He did not like how Karl acted throughout the course of the case and the trial. He seemed to always act kind of cocky. He was always talking about what he was going to do, how he was going to act after he won. That does not sound good. It just sounds cocky. He shouldn't have been speaking like that. He was just too cocky because of the whole ego he had with this whole thing against Billy. So those are all lessons that should be learned there. Now, here's another key question, though, about this whole thing, which this is still somewhat of an open question. This one is more up to debate, up to interpretation, which is, did Karl purposely mislead his entire audience? Because many people feel misled. Many people, as I stated in the video that I've published on this, many people were under this false assumption that the case was to do with Billy Mitchell cheating in Donkey Kong, and that Karl had defamed Billy by calling him a cheater. Now, of course, anyone who was actually reading any of the actual documents, anyone who was going to any of the actual primary sources, or who actually followed it from the beginning, we all knew that that's not what it was about primarily. Now, that did come into it to an extent, because of course it does have a bit of an impact, the fact that Billy already had a bad reputation as a cheater. But by and large, that didn't come into it very much at all. We knew it was about these specific claims related to Apollo. Now, the question is, did Karl purposely mislead the audience? And that one is a bit open to interpretation. I would say that over the years, as all of this played out, you could say that Karl was never going to make a video. Well, let's put it this way. Karl, he wanted to keep making videos about Billy because it was a good cash cow for him. The Billy videos, they always did well. He had other videos that were doing equally as well, but his Billy videos, they were a good cash cow. They were getting good money, and they were getting good views. To that extent, you could say that, well, his audience wanted it, and so that's what he provided to them. But it was more of a lie by omission, because he never mentioned the fact of what his case was really about, and he never really spoken about his own case. He was talking about all these other people's cases, and that misled a lot of people, made them think it was about the cheating and whatnot, when really it wasn't. Now, I would say that Karl, he didn't necessarily intentionally set out to mislead anyone there. It would have been stupid for him to make an in-depth video and all sorts of videos talking about his case with Billy. I don't know if most people just don't understand how these type of lawsuits work, and that, you know, it'd be a stupid idea for a YouTuber to live, real-time, make videos about his own case. But, you know, that's understandable that he didn't do that. But I do think he was aware that there was this misconception out there. He definitely would have been aware that there was a massive misconception going on about what this case was about. I mean, I was aware that this misconception was going on, and the other people who were paying proper attention, we were all aware this misconception, this mass misconception in the audience was going on. And he definitely also would have known that this misconception was going on. I believe he kind of played into it, and he hoped that he would just win and be able to talk about how he won, and that would be it, and no one would really question it. And I think that he never went out of his way to correct, I would say, as far as I've seen at least, he never went out of his way to correct this or to make sure this misconception was cleared up. So I believe that he didn't necessarily intentionally set out to mislead the audience, but he recognized that this was going on. This is my opinion. He recognized that that was going on. He benefited from it, and therefore he made no attempt to clear it up. He never went out of his way to clear it up. And he did talk about his own case every now and then as well. It's not like he strictly just never spoke about the case. He did talk about it sometimes, and even still, when he did talk about it, he never cleared up this misconception. Now, we have somebody in the chat here. He says, personally, I think he was aware of it and used it to his advantage to gain funds to sue Billy, knowing full well the people giving the money didn't fully know what was going on. He knew people weren't going to look into it. So what I'd say about that is, I'm not too sure about that, because I'd have to go back and look at the exact timeline. The problem with this is so many things happened, and it was years ago now, that remembering the exact timeline of all these things is quite difficult. From what I remember, I believe there was at least multiple times that Billy began a legal proceeding against Karl of some kind, or at least threatened to. And we may be getting confused between, different times here. And I'm not sure how much he actually crowdfunded exactly. So I'd have to go back and look at the specifics of that. It is possible, but again, I'd have to go back, look at the specifics of that, look at when he exactly said that, and under what circumstances he made the GoFundMe. So I wouldn't be confident in saying that right now unless I was to go back and look back at it. But it is definitely possible. And again, I'm not sure how much he actually crowdfunded versus how much was out of his own pocket or from other financial support. In regards to the financial hit, and it is ironic, has to be said, it is quite ironic how, if you think about it, all these Billy videos that Karl has made over the years, and he has stated in his Discord, by the way, I've seen Karl state that he usually gets something like $5 to $10K per video in sponsorship, plus he's going to be getting more on top of that for the ad revenue and whatnot. And it's interesting to think that all the money that Karl has made on these Billy videos over the years has all been lost. Not only has it all been lost, it's all going directly to the pockets of Billy. That is quite, crazy to think about, that basically all the fans have been bankrolling Billy this entire time. And in terms of the damages, Billy actually got a bit less than what he asked for. Billy asked for 400,000 Australian dollars plus 50,000 aggravated. And the judge gave 300,000 plus 50 aggravated. So the judge reduced it by 100,000 compared to what Billy wanted. But the judge also stated that he thought that if Billy asked for more than 50,000 on the aggravated, he probably would have got that. So it seems that Billy actually kind of lowballed himself when he asked for the 50,000 aggravated. The judge awarded that because that's what was asked for, but the judge also implied that he could have gotten more if he had asked for more. So he actually kind of lowballed himself there, which is quite interesting. Now we have EXE in the chat saying, so the whole thing backfired. Yeah, well, it did. The reality is that Karl, he probably could have settled with Billy. That's another thing worth pointing out. As we know, Billy has sued many people, and I believe none of them have ever gone to trial. They've all been settled out of court, and that's what usually always happens in a case like this. A defamation case like this, if you look at the statistics, it's something like 95% of these cases never go to trial. They get settled beforehand. It's very rare that this would happen. And obviously the reason why it happened is because Karl never wanted to back down. As he stated himself on interviews, he viewed himself as this crusader who was going to be the one guy to not back down, whereas everybody else settled with Billy. He was going to be the one guy to not back down, to see it through to the end. So he made it an explicit point from the beginning to never back down and to always never settle or compromise with Billy. That's the only reason why it even went as far as the trial to begin with. And again, that was probably his ego blindsiding him right there, his ego getting the better of him, his pride getting the better of him, stopping him from being able to see the actual most rational path that most people would have taken. And that's why it ended up going to trial. And clearly Billy must have been aware the whole time that he was going to have somebody says in the chat, no way Karl could take the ego hit, especially from Billy. So yeah, I mean, in reality, he could have compromised. He could have come to a compromised middle ground and settled with him, as is what happened in all the other cases, and as is what happens in 95% of these type of defamation cases. But he was never going to take that any compromise with Billy. He wanted a full slam dunk win against Billy, and that's what backfired so much on him. And now people are saying as well, I'm more concerned about the wife and the child. This is going to hurt the entire family. And somebody says, Karl should have thought about his family and the financial consequences. Now, this is all fair to say. Obviously, we don't know the specifics of any of Karl's financials. He has stated himself that he's going to be fine, whether he's going to financially be safe. He's prepared. He has stated himself in his Discord, and I believe in one of his videos, that he was prepared to lose, and that if he did lose, that he was, he's not going to be destitute or anything like that. But of course, there's going to be a big hit. If we actually look at how much money he's going to lose here, well, it was 400,000 in terms of the damages, Plus, he said himself that he paid 600,000 in his legal fees, so that takes us up to 1 million Australian. Plus, he's going to have to pay, almost certainly, he's going to have to pay Billy's legal fees as well. And according to Karl, he has stated that Billy's legal fees is going to be less than his because he did it more cheap. And he had cheaper counsel and whatnot. But let's say it was half that. Let's say it was half of Karl's. That would be 300. So we can probably say 1.3 million Australian dollars is how much Karl is going to be in the hole here. And here's another interesting question. This is something that I actually asked in the Karl Jobst Discord server earlier. Something that I asked to him, but he didn't actually answer. He was in the chat, he was talking, but he purposely did not answer this question. And that was the fact that Notch, some years ago, Notch was saying that he was going to financially back Karl. I believe he said something like if it came to it, he would fund the entire suit. And I'm not sure whatever happened to that. I asked Karl, are you still getting any backup from Notch in his server? And he did not respond to that. So I don't know if that's still going on, if he's received any financial help from Notch. I mean, if Notch is already still backing him, as was previously discussed, like 1.3 million Australian is nothing to him. So, I don't know what the status of that is. Now, somebody says here, Karl assumed he'd win and gloated about it for years. He had mentioned Apollo Legend a small number of times, but we all assumed the trial was about the cheating claims. Yeah, he did. He had this assumption that he was going to win. I believe it's probably because, and look, we have to have some empathy for him. We can't just shit on him. We can understand from his perspective. It's a very human type of mistake to make. He really did think that overall, by and large, he was in the right on Billy. He thought that Billy really was just this cunt, nobody liked him, a cheater, and all this. He did genuinely think he was the good guy, and maybe that's true to an extent. We do know that at the end of the day, I still believe that Billy was a cheater and all this. So he was still correct in a lot of things he said about Billy, but he took that too far. Then at the end of the day, just because you dislike someone, he dislikes Billy, he thinks he's a cheater, but at the end of the day, just because you dislike someone doesn't mean you can start throwing around these defamatory and false and unvetted, accusations. Now we have Easyscape saying Notch backed him for a while, then didn't, then eventually supported him again. He mentioned it in a podcast, never said dollar amounts, then an original 180k amount. And I'm assuming that's probably US 180k. So yeah, so we don't know. Probably Notch has funded a decent chunk, but I'm sure he's not going to probably bail him out on the whole thing. And it would be interesting to hear if Notch has any thoughts on this. It would be interesting to hear if Notch himself feels if he was misled by Karl or not. I'm not sure what he feels about all this. Although, of course, that's not going to be very much money to him. So he probably doesn't mind either way. Somebody says, Billy is clearly very skilled at DK in recent gameplay. I find it lame that Karl never acknowledged that and encouraged him to pull it off again instead of putting him down. Well, I can't really comment too much on that because I don't really know about Donkey Kong. I don't really know what's considered good these days. I know that he has matched or even exceeded his old times or his old scores. However, obviously it's different. It's a lot different doing that now, especially if there's new strategies and stuff like that. It's a lot better. It's a lot different to do that nowadays in the modern day compared to doing it back then. And it's not, I don't think it's anywhere close to world record these days. So it is a bit of a different situation, but yeah, I don't necessarily blame Karl for that. Obviously, nobody would dispute he is a good Donkey Kong player. Somebody says he didn't quit while he was ahead. He bit off more than he could chew. Yeah, basically, he was just too arrogant. Billy is decent relative to current standards. I don't think he can be considered a top player. Yeah, I would agree with that. He is decent. He wouldn't be considered a top player. Now, I'll say this as well. So there was a guy from America, and he flew to Australia to sit in on the entire trial. Now, that's another interesting factor on this. The result of the trial, the decision, was streamed live in the courtroom, but the rest of the trial was not. The trial was open anyone could actually go in. Anyone could go in and view the entire trial, but you had to be there in person. There was no cameras allowed, anything like that. So we had one guy who had this website, perfectpatman.com, and he went out of his way to go to Australia to sit in on the entire trial, and he wrote down a report of every single day. He wrote down a report to the best of his memory of the account of that day. I read through that entire thing, and I have to say, well, we got to give credit to that guy because he's the only guy who gave us the full insight, a good insight into the trial as it was happening. But I have to say, as I was reading through that entire thing, I only became more and more sure, especially in the final day. I was quite sure that, Billy was going to win. You can never know for sure. You never know how the judge is going to interpret these things, but I was pretty damn sure that Billy was going to win when it got to the final day there. The big thing that came up on that final day is the fact of how apparently Karl had edited out the part of the video with the false claim. He edited it out after he got the information that it was false, but then he republished it again when Billy said he was going to sue, out of basically just a fuck you to Billy. And so that really, from the account of what that guy said about that was on the final day of the trial when this happened. Pivotal day, a pivotal moment when this came up and the judge questioned this. And as per that guy's account of the final day, the judge was very displeased about that when he realized that Karl had republished these claims after already receiving the information that it was false. That is one of the things that stuck out that really got him here. That was another big mistake he made. He should have never republished it once he had gotten that information coming in. Now, I will go ahead. I will take a look at the Discord here. Okay, so we do have one guy in the waiting room. Actually, a friend of mine. So I don't know what he's going to have to say about this. I don't know if he knows anything about this, the whole situation very much, but I'll bring him in. Guys, when I bring this guy in, do let me know if there's any audio issues. I don't 100% know if it's set up correctly to capture the audio and everything. All right, we got Daddy Dev. Hello, Dev. You there?
Hello, 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 hello. I would like to say...
All right, I don't know if he's there or not. I don't know if I can hear him. I don't know if he even knows that he's here, to be quite honest. Hello, Dev. Hello.
Hello, hello. One, I would like to say thank you for calling me a friend. I appreciate that. Secondly, huge fan of you and Karl, honestly. Huge fan of both of you. And I would just like to say kindly, warmly, I think we are attributing too much malice to Karl, right? Was him re-uploading the video again stupid? Yes, undeniably so. But it's hard not to feel vindicated when you're going up against somebody who's known to be as litigious as Billy. This guy has been suing people for eons at this point, and finally Karl decided, you're not going to be you're not going to get over on me anymore.
Well, I do understand that. I would say that, and yeah, his mic is a little bit dodgy right now, but we can make you out.
Well, I do apologize.
Yeah, I would say that, look, I have stated earlier in the stream that at the end of the day, I don't necessarily think that Karl set out to intentionally mislead anyone on this. I do think he took advantage of the situation, and I think he knew he was aware that people were being misled. I think he was aware there was a misconception. He didn't do anything to correct it. But, how much malice you want to attribute to him there is up to you. I wouldn't go too far on calling him malicious for that. But yeah, the other factor about him republishing it, I would say that thing of where he republished the video, that is not a good look to me, because it does kind of seem like it does kind of seem as if he did that out of a bit of spite. Because my understanding, and I may be a bit wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure this is what happened, is that Billy had announced, Billy put out a response video, and he said, look, this is false. There was no payment between me and Apollo and all this. He had made that all clear. And he had also stated Um, he'd also stated in there that he said something that insinuated he was probably going to sue Karl. And then Karl, after that response from Billy came out, I believe that's when he put it back in. So it seems as if he was like, he got this response from Billy, and obviously Billy, he was acting a bit cocky as he always does. Not to say, obviously Billy, we all know he's got a massive ego as well. But Billy, he's acting a bit cocky. Karl took it, as an insult, and then out of a bit of spite there, I believe he put it back in. I would say that does look pretty bad, because he should have never said it to begin with. He really should have never. It was a crazy thing to say. It really was a crazy thing to say from the get-go. Like I say, I knew from the day that he published it that this was going to be a problem. I could tell from the day that he made that statement. I immediately had red flags going off. And he should have known better. And then the fact, so just from doing it the first time, and then from doing it the second time in that circumstance, yeah, to me, it does come off as at least a bit malicious, to be honest. That's my opinion. But we can also understand from his headspace where he was at. He would have really felt that he was in the right overall. And he would have felt that it would have been, he probably felt that the universe owed him this win. He probably would have thought that, he couldn't envision a future. He couldn't envision a reality in the future where he's losing to Billy and he's having to pay Billy millions. He was like, nah, there's no way that the universe will plan an outcome. There's no way that God will allow this path to happen of where in a few years' time I'm going to be paying Billy $1 million. He just would have thought that the universe would have been on his side, I think. Again, I'm speculating on his headspace here. I can't claim to know any of this. This is all just speculation of what's going on in his head, but I believe that all makes sense and we can understand that on a human level. I'm not saying that he's an evil guy or just a malicious guy overall for doing this, but I believe he was acting maliciously in some of the things he did towards Billy throughout this whole process.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with some of that, but it's a very interesting day that Billy won a case against arguably the biggest speed run YouTuber, if you could call him that, right? Because he's not a speed runner, but his channel's absolutely massive, and I really think this may be the thing that puts Billy back on the map, just publicly, So big dubs to Billy all around. Big dubs to Billy all around.
Well, Billy, he's going to be able to this is something now worth pointing out, which is that, as we know, that again, I'm going to speculate a bit here, but as we've been talking about, we've been talking about this whole phenomenon of how there's been this whole misconception the entire time amongst the fan base of what the case was about. Everyone thought that it was about the cheating allegations, but it was not about that. And we've discussed of how Karl kind of took advantage of that misconception. One thing that we may be wary of, we may want to be on the lookout for going forward is Billy going to try to take advantage of the same misconception? Maybe Billy, he's going to start lauding around this victory as if it vindicates him from the cheating allegations, even though, again, it's got nothing to do with that. And as the judge stated himself in his verdict there, the judge clearly stated, I've not been asked to make any judgment on whether the cheating allegations are true. So it's possible that Billy possibly will actually try to take advantage of that misconception and try to act as if, or at least act to some of his friends as if this vindicates him from the cheating allegations, whereas it actually doesn't. Again, he's not saying he's done that, not saying he will do that, but it is a possible thing he could attempt to do. So that's worth pointing out as well. That's worth keeping an eye on as it goes forward here. And maybe Billy will just say nothing about it, but
me making assumptions of people that I don't know, but at this point, Billy's 60 years old, man. I think he's had enough of this,
Well,
but,
possibly, but you could also argue that maybe he's got nothing better to do. Maybe that's why he's been doing all these lawsuits, because he's just got nothing better to do. Who knows? So that's another question.
Possibly.
That therefore is another question about this whole thing, which is this victory, is it going to embolden him to sue anyone else? Could there be any other targets? I don't know if there are. Probably not. If there is any other target that he has, somebody who he might sue, I would say it would be the perfectpacman.com website. That website, like I said, the guy who runs that site, he was the one who went to the trial, and he gave us the full account every day of what was going on in the trial. But he's very anti-Billy. He's always been very pro-Karl, anti-Billy, and he's written a lot of articles, anti-Billy. So if this does embolden Billy, who knows, maybe he could sue, potentially that guy, potentially somebody else. I don't know. Maybe he'll just leave it at this. But again, that's another thing to possibly look out for.
Well, thank you for having me on, Retro. I appreciate it, and look forward to new videos.
All right, excellent to hear from you. I appreciate you coming in and giving a bit of pushback to what I was saying, because we do need that.
Yes.
All right, excellent. So if anyone else does want to call in, then you can join the waiting room in the server. So somebody says here, he will act as if it fights against his cheating allegations, as that's how Karl framed his videos on him in the first place. Somebody says, yes, we should give him a little bit of room instead of saying it was 100% malicious, but there's a line to be drawn with how much attention one could get from their actions. So yeah, I mean, as I say, I definitely wouldn't claim he's 100%, malicious or anything. But yeah, again, any of the YouTubers, you should take note of what we've seen here. Karl, he may have had to been a little bit of a sacrificial lamb for other people to now pick up on what's happened here, and how to navigate these situations and to not repeat the same mistake as him, especially if you're a YouTuber or something like that. Never let your ego get too big and tied in one of these battles. You need to still act rationally, think rationally. Don't be throwing stuff out there just because you don't like a guy. So keep all these things in mind. Now, here's another question to bring up. The only thing really remaining, you could maybe argue, well, you never know when these sagas are finished. Nobody would have thought that this whole saga with Billy would have us here now, like 5, 6, 7 years later, still talking about it. So maybe, who knows where it's going to go from here. But perhaps this whole thing will be over with one more final act, which would be Karl's response. I have been looking at Karl Jobst's Discord server, and he has been stating that he's planning to make a response video. He was stating that it's going to be done within maybe a week or two. And who knows how he's going to spin it? Who knows if he's going to take any responsibility? We have no idea how he's going to spin it right now. Maybe he'll just be 100% truthful about it, but he's going to have to. I'm sure he's going to try to defend himself in some way, and it only remains to be seen of how he's going to do that. Reality is as well, he doesn't have to. He could just ignore it entirely. He doesn't have to, even acknowledge it whatsoever. But he will probably feel pressure to. He'll probably feel that if he doesn't, then the fans, obviously, this has been his sole focus for years. And if it was another type of situation, I would say, honestly, he shouldn't even respond to it. He should just ignore it. That is a possible path, is for him to just ignore it. But the reality is, because he's made this basically the main focus of his channel, the biggest focus of his channel for years, all the fans, he's gonna feel pressured, like he has to respond, and maybe he does. The fans are not gonna be satisfied. The fans are gonna pick up on the fact that he's purposely ignoring it if he doesn't respond. So I think he will feel that he needs to respond and give out some defense of his side. Honestly, maybe it'd be better for him if he just didn't and just said nothing. We know that he can continue with his other videos. He's still popular on his other videos. So that is a possible course for him, is to just ignore it. But who knows if he's going to actually do that or not. He's probably, well, as I say, I would say he's almost certainly is going to go ahead and do a response. All right, so I think we've actually got Billy in the chat here. I don't know if it's the real Billy or if it's one of his many, fan accounts or parody accounts, but there he is. He sent us a few hearts in the chat. So all I can say, if that is the real Billy, I'll just say, congratulations to you on your win here. And, you do deserve to be vindicated of this whole claim in regards to Apollo, as I've stated. Also, if you have evidence for someone causing someone else to harm themselves, shouldn't you report it to the authorities without trying to be a detective online? Look, here's one other thing I'll throw out there, because again, this is another thing that I don't think Karl has ever actually addressed. Where did he get this information from? I mean, because that's another thing. This whole thing of what he claimed about Apollo, did he really just come up with it himself? Did he come up with it himself? Or did he get it from somebody else? And if he did get it from somebody else, who did he get it from? Those are all open questions as well. And he's never addressed that. Again, I think people have tried to ask him that in the Discord server, but you ask him a question in his Discord, sometimes he'll respond immediately. Sometimes he'll be a bit evasive and just ignore it. And I believe that is one of the questions that he's always ignored. I don't know if there was anything stated about that in the actual court case, but I don't think there's been any clear, did he just come up with that himself, or did he get it from somebody else? But I think it's fair to say that he definitely didn't have any good reason or a good source to believe that. He maybe just was willing to believe anything about Billy. Again, when he had, maybe he just got it. Yeah, I guess he just got it off Reddit, as somebody says. I mean, look, he had such a negative impression. There is a phenomenon that happens. If you have such a negative impression of someone, then at some point people just stop believing anything about him. So I believe this has happened in other cases before. With Billy, I think the similar thing happened. He thought that Billy was such an evil guy and everything that in his head at some point he just felt that he could believe anything. So as soon as somebody said this rumor to him, because he had such a negative impression of Billy already in his head, he was willing to just believe anything without, in his head it just passed all the checks, or bypassed all the checks, I should say. So that is another factor as well. I mean, there was a time, that's another thing, because when Billy, bit of Billy derangement syndrome, one may say, as somebody said in the chat there. So these are all valid questions as well. And there was the one occasion of where Billy, of where Karl gave his retraction, or as was pointed out in the court, it was somewhat of a half-baked retraction where he seemed to be trying to kind of do the minimum necessary. And in that he stated, "Oh, sorry guys," he's like, "Sorry guys for saying this wrong. I didn't mean to spread any false information, but I wouldn't have said it unless I had a good reason." He said, "I wouldn't have made such a claim unless I had a very good reason to believe it." That's what he stated. Again, was that just a total farce from him? Did he have something that could pass for a good reason? I don't know. EasyScape says, "I assumed Karl had more sources than just some random Redditor." We can assume that, but honestly, for as far as we can understand, it was basically just Reddit or some equivalent. And somebody says in the chat, the opposite is true as well. Lots of us had such a positive opinion of Karl, we just believed him. So yeah, same thing right there. Okay, we do actually have somebody in the waiting room right now. So I'm going to bring this guy in a moment. I'll just address this one other question before I bring him in. So he says, "Hey Retro, do you think this could open floodgates and other people can sue Karl, such as the past gamers he exposed?" Well, some people have been throwing around the idea of a class action suit against Karl for collecting the GoFundMe money under false pretenses. I doubt that's going to happen. Sounds very unlikely to me. Some people have floated around the idea, but I doubt it's going to happen. I don't necessarily think he deserves that. And as for anybody else, I don't think the reality is most people, they don't want to take on the burden of suing and going through a whole thing. Most people don't want to take on the burden of dedicating years of life to this, and most people aren't necessarily in a stable financial position to do it, and all this type of thing. So most people aren't ever going to sue, even if they get. The reality is, I could make up some nonsense about some homeless guy, some bum on the street right now. And the sad truth of how the world works, he'd probably never be able to do anything about it just because he doesn't have the resources, time, energy, money. He doesn't have the resources to do anything about it. So most people don't. So I think it's unlikely that anybody else will sue him. I don't know if anybody else would have a good case against him. Clearly, Billy had a good case here. I don't know if anybody else would have a good case that comes to mind against him. I believe this does stand out. As far as I know, this does stand out as clearly the biggest mistake that he's made. I don't think Karl's necessarily made a bigger mistake than this. All right, so now we're going to bring in Vlad. All right, we've got Vlad 2D. Hello, are you there?
Hello?
Hello.
Hey. Hey, Retro. Big fan. So yeah, I'm not really prepared, but something interesting to say. Like, if you read the description of the last video of Apollo Legends video, like, he said something about thanks for the last push for Dark Viper and Easy Escape. It's really hard to remember every detail because I really don't want to reread it again. I probably need to find it again. Like, is it on part bad journalism on Karl's part? Like, why? How did he come up with that conclusion that Billy had something to do with pushing Apollo? Like, I still don't understand this. This is what like was on my mind like for like 10 minutes at least. I was researching all of this. I tried to read like everything before this, but I can't really think today. Sorry about that. Like, what do you think? Like, how did he come up with that conclusion? Is it really just from Reddit?
All right, so I'll step in on this. So you've brought up a bit of a touchy subject there, but it is something we should talk about, which is the fact that in the description of Apollo's final video, he does put this line in there where he states that he says I believe the exact words was something to the effect of, "Thank you to Easyscape and Dark Viper for giving me the final push," or the final push that I needed, or something like this. Now, this is a bit of a touchy, I hate to bring this up, it's a touchy subject to bring up. But I would say, look, if we're going to be 100% honest about the situation, clearly Easyscape and Dark Viper was on his mind, during that moment when he let it all out there. It may have been the last thing he ever wrote, was those words in the description there. And clearly that was on his mind. He felt one way or another he'd been betrayed by him. Yeah, I don't want to go over... I don't even remember most of it, so, I certainly don't want to retread all that drama of whatever happened between him and Easyscape and Dark Viper. But whatever happened there, in his head at least, he thought he'd been screwed over by them in some way, or betrayed by them in some way. And, well, the fact that he went and kind of called him out, some would say threw him under the bus, well, nobody put any blame on those guys, Nobody put any blame on Dark Viper and Easyscape. And I would say overall, rightfully so. They don't deserve to feel responsibility for that. I would say, they shouldn't be held responsible or feel responsibility for that. But, everyone came out. I remember at the time, everyone came out to defend those guys. They said, look, everyone called Apollo kind of a dick. Everyone said, that was a dickish thing for Apollo to do, to kind of throw them under the bus in his last words there. And nobody was blaming them. So the reality is, if you're going to put any blame on Billy for this, you would at least have to be consistent, and you'd have to put blame on them as well, because, he mentioned those two people specifically. And equally the other way around. Well, if you're not going to put any blame on them, then you certainly can't, as most people wouldn't. If you're not going to put any blame on those guys, then surely you can't put any blame on Billy either, right? And surely if Billy was on his mind, he would have included him in that list of people right there. So I think that as well is very solid proof. I think that in itself really is very solid evidence that really Billy did not have any significant, if any, role in this whole thing. And if you're going to be logically consistent, if you're not going to hold Easyscape or Dark Viper as if they're accountable in any way, well, you'd have to put the same standard. You certainly couldn't hold Billy accountable in any way. So that's another factor as well. And that's another factor that also adds to this confusion of how Karl could have possibly got this wrong. As for how Karl came up with this whole misconception to begin with, I've discussed that a bit earlier. The ultimate truth is we don't know. He either just got it from Reddit, he made it up himself, somebody who he thought was trustworthy told it to him and he just believed it. We don't know on that. And he's never quite answered that. When people have asked in the Discord, I believe he's just always ignored the question. So the truth is on that, we just don't know. But I do think that as well, given that context, that gives further context on how it's kind of a bit of you could say an indefensible, mistake for him to make. So I don't know if you got anything else to add there.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm gonna go.
All right. Thanks very much, Vlad. All right, guys. So I'll just catch up on the chat for a moment here. All right. Well, we've done a pretty good deep dive into the whole situation there. So I'm going to mostly conclude this here. I'll just say, look, the one remaining thing that we're waiting on right now is how's Karl going to respond to this? What's he going to say? How's he going to respond to this? That's the only thing we're waiting on. Depending on what happens there, maybe we'll do another episode to discuss it further. If not, if there's nothing further interesting from that, then this may be the last word on it. But I think I've stated everything I needed to state. So if anyone wants to bring up anything else in the chat, if anyone wants to join in to the waiting room, then we can continue this on further. If not, then we'll end this in a few minutes here. Somebody's stating something about Mutahar. Mutahar tried to cover for Karl in his new video. Look, I'll be honest. I'm not gonna. I did see that he uploaded a video, but I'm not gonna. I struggle to listen to 35 minutes of Mutahar. He's very rambly. He doesn't necessarily know much about. A lot of the time, he's the type of guy who doesn't really know much about the topics he's talking about most of the time. He all this stuff he probably just found out all about it all like yesterday. So I haven't actually watched his video. I don't really know what he says. Somebody asking about the completionist. Does he have a chance to come back and sue Karl? So yeah, he was another guy that Karl has gone after somewhat. I don't know anything about that. I haven't really kept up to date with that. I don't know. It's possible. It is possible. If put it this way, the only thing I can say about that right now is any of the people who Karl has been in disputes with in the past, they may look at this, and if they feel they have a good, at least equally as good case as Billy, then it is possible that they could try to sue. They could be emboldened by this and try to sue themselves. It could happen, but I don't know if anyone's got a good case. I haven't kept up with the whole completionist thing. It's possible. You would assume that guy's probably would be financially capable of suing, but I don't know if Karl has actually made any big mistakes around that of a similar magnitude. So let me see. I agree Muta is a waffler. Oh yeah. Hard to dispute that one. Simple, Karl defamed Billy. Everything else is irrelevant, sadly. And Mutahar BTFO'd. Alright. Alright, well, thus far, we haven't had anyone else come into the waiting room, so I believe that's everything there is to say on this for now. I may do another further follow-up on this if there's anything further interesting that happens if and when Karl puts out his response. But I say for now, that's everything. If anyone wants to donate, somebody needs to be my first donator at some point, because I haven't had any yet, but you can see the Buy Me a Coffee link underneath at the bottom of the screen. if anyone, has enjoyed my work or coverage enough. But I'm going to end it off here for now. Thanks everyone for listening. To the 2 people who called in, thanks very much for calling in. You both brought up good things that needed to be discussed. So I'll probably allow these call-ins on future streams as well. So if anyone wants to get involved in any of that, join the Discord. Thanks very much for watching. This is your boy Retro, signing out.